Welcome, everyone. Really glad you're here. We'll give it another minute for people to trickle in and then we'll get started. I'll cover off a bit of housekeeping to begin with. If you've got a question or anything you'd like clarified, please pop it in the chat. My amazing producer, Emma, will collate that and we'll go through your excellent pre-submitted questions at the end, as well as the best questions from the chat. So please pop that in there. And we will be sending a recording of this webinar after probably tomorrow morning, all going well. So if you miss anything, if you want to forward it to a friend, you want your partner to listen, please watch out for that email tomorrow. Right, let's go. Thank you so much for joining us today. And what a day to be talking about this. The OCR decision came out at 2 p.m. to hold, so we've got live context for everything we're covering tonight. I'll weave it in as we go. The topic came up because we kept hearing the same question from clients in very different situations. Is property still worth it? And the honest answer is, it depends on you. That's exactly what today is about. Quick bit of background on me. I'm a chartered accountant and qualified financial advisor, and I lead the coaching team nationally at Enable Me. I've spent 25-ish plus years across accounting, investment banking, and financial coaching in the UK, US, and here in New Zealand. And I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients across exactly the kind of decisions we're talking about today. I also write a fortnightly column on personal finance for stuff. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how to make this stuff practical and accessible, not theoretical. That's the spirit we'll bring today. And just a little bit more housekeeping before we dive in. What we cover today is general information. It's not personalized financial advice. Everyone's situation is different, and we're going to talk a lot about why that matters. Nothing here should be taken as a substitute for advice that's tailored to you. Okay, with that said, let's get into it. And I really want to understand a little bit more about who is in the audience today. And so we're going to run a couple of polls to help me determine that so I can tailor the content thereafter. So I'm really interested to know, do you own an investment property? And Emma will push that poll up. Great. And if you could just let us know, that would be great. And we also would like to know how many years you are until 65, just in terms of that retirement trajectory, because that really does impact on your financial strategy, particularly around property. Oh, fantastic. Okay, 62% do, 38% do not. Okay, thank you. Next poll is just let me know whether you're already retired, 5 years until retirement, 10 years until retirement, or 20 years or more. And again, that just plays into, again, kind of where we'll lean in the rest of the webinar. Okay. Okay, 10 years until retirement, vast majority, 5 years already retired, 20 years or more. Okay, pretty good spread actually. Okay, I'll make sure that I cover all of that off within what we talk about today. Thank you very much. So in terms of framing, for a long time, property felt like the obvious wealth move in New Zealand. Buy something solid, hold it, let time do the heavy lifting. And for a lot of people, that worked, like it genuinely worked. But the question has shifted. It's not just should I invest in property anymore? It's something more specific. Is property still the right move for me from where I am standing right now? And I think that's a more honest question, and it deserves a more honest answer than a simple yes or no. And that's what we're going to work through today together. And I understand that property feels harder now, and I think today's OCR decision sits right inside this. And I'll give you a read straight off the bat in terms of what it means. And so you would have seen the OCR was held today at 2.25%. And I think it's really important that we don't mistake that for relief. The vote was 3-3, and Governor Bremen broke the tie. And every committee member agreed on one thing: hikes are coming as early as July with the inflationary pressure. So banks have been moving up fixed rates for weeks, and the hold just buy us a little time. It doesn't change the direction. If you've been waiting for rates to ease before making a move, that's just not a strategy. And tonight is about whether your position can hold through what's coming. Rising rates don't make property the wrong decision. I think they raise it really does. It raises the bar on what a good decision looks like. The people who do well from here know their numbers before they moved, and they don't wait for it to feel comfortable, because as you and I know, it really does. And again, I think that feeds in to it feeling harder now, along with property values feel flatter. The capital growth we got used to has been slower. That does, it changes the maths. And for a lot of us, retirement is getting closer. And for some of you, the timeline has shifted. And that does change the risk calculation. And lending feels tighter. Serviceability tests are tougher. The banks are asking harder questions. And along with that, holding costs have increased. Rates, insurance, maintenance, the cost of owning has gone up, and the market just feels noisier overall. There's a lot of opinion out there, and it's hard to separate the signal from the noise. And none of this means property is off the table, but it does mean the decision needs to be more deliberate, more strategic than it might have been even a decade ago. And we acknowledge that. And let me describe two types of conversations we're having with clients at the moment. And I suspect most of you will see yourself in one of them, or maybe both. And the first group are what I call the hesitators. These are people who've thought about property for years, maybe a long time, but haven't made the move. They have income or equity or both. They're capable, but something keeps stopping them. And what I often hear from this group is a version of, is this still a thing, property? Or is it just a chance to make a really expensive mistake? And that uncertainty is completely understandable. But here's the thing: hesitation isn't neutral. Staying put also is a financial decision, and it has its own costs. And we're going to come back to that in a minute. And the second group are the doubters. These are people who already own property, often for a long time. They've built equity, they've been patient, they've done the right things, but now they're getting closer to retirement, and a question has crept in. Does this asset still do the job I need it to do? Is it going to give me income or flexibility, or is it just going to give me headaches? And this is a completely legitimate question, and it's one I respect hugely, actually, because it takes courage to review something you've worked hard to build. The goal today is to give you the frameworks to think about this clearly. So whether you're a hesitator or a doubter or something in between, this session is for you. And this is really important. Before we get into any specifics about property, before we talk about suburbs or yields or structure, I want to start somewhere different, because the best property decisions I've seen people make don't actually start with property. They start with a question: what am I actually trying to make possible? For most people, the real goal isn't to buy an investment property, that is a mechanism. The goal underneath it is something else entirely. And we've got some examples on the screen there. More choice in life, meaning options, not obligation, being able to reduce work earlier than the default retirement age, so before 65, closing a gap they can already see opening up between their retirement income and their expenses, and building wealth that isn't tied up in the family home. And property is a tool. It's a good tool for a lot of purposes, but only if it actually fits what you're trying to build. And when you think about property, like you really have to think, well, what is the underlying goal for you? And here's a concept I find genuinely useful. Give your property a job to do. A property doesn't need to do everything. It really doesn't, but it does need to do something. And you should be able to name what that something is. And the role might be to grow long-term wealth. It might be to create future income. It might be to use existing equity more productively rather than just leaving it sitting there in one home. And it might be to sit alongside other investments as part of a diversified plan. And what I find with clients who are clear about the job, even roughly, is the decision becomes so much clearer and easier. They know what success looks like. They can ask better questions and they're less likely to be distracted by the noise and the headlines around them. And if you can't articulate the job, that's not a failure on your behalf. It's just information, and it tells you the conversation you need to have before you make any moves. Really, really important. And I want to give you a question to sit with. Just finish this sentence. I'm interested in property because I want it to. And just take a moment. What comes up for you? And if the answer is immediate and specific, that's great. That's a really good sign. But if it's vague or if what comes up is more about fear of missing out than in clear intention, that's worth noticing too. And I think a vague answer doesn't mean property is wrong. It means the strategy isn't clear enough yet. And a strategy that isn't clear enough yet, it generally produces decisions that feel rushed or second guessed or uncomfortable. And I think getting clear on this is often the most valuable thing that happens in a coaching conversation before any numbers are looked at. So I'd like you to kind of feed back to me kind of where you've landed. So we've got a wee poll just in terms of these are the main things that come up for our clients, and just choose as many as resonate with you. I'm just waiting for that.
We've got a lot of comment, poll bits coming through, so I'm just seeing them rise and rise and rise. So I'm just
Oh,
letting it have a
amazing.
moment
Okay,
to settle.
our amazing producer. It's like, don't go so fast, Katie. Should have a drum
There we
roll.
go.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, comes up again and again about that choice piece, having more choice around the work you do, how long you work for, so important. Yeah, all the right reasons. Yep, love that. Yeah, I'm really interested. I wonder that other, for a lot of people, it's also, helping my kids a little bit more in terms of giving them more options. I hear that again and again. So that's really useful to understand as part of that overarching strategy. And I'd like to share a little story about some real clients. I've obviously kept it general, but everything I'm about to say happened. And so this is an Auckland couple who came to actually see me in October 2020, just after lockdown, before the terrible, terrible Auckland lockdown of 2021. So they were in the early 50s. 52 and 47, two kids, both still at home. One was at like final years of school, one was just finished studying and working but paying board. They had a home mortgage, some short-term debt, and 66K in their Kiwi savers between them, and a mortgage that was on track to take about 15 years to pay off. And their goal was pretty straightforward. They wanted to get mortgage free, clear the short-term debt, build a buffer, and be able to pay for braces without it being a crisis. The teenager was needing braces, and it was a crisis because they already had that short-term debt. They dearly wanted to travel and just be in a position to potentially help the kids. The obstacle was they didn't have a plan. They had goals, but no plan. They didn't understand what they were capable of. And in the absence of not knowing, they kind of were doing what they've always done, hoping for the best. And when we looked at the full picture, we found the leaks, continuously kind of spending and tinkering on the house. There was, again, a little bit of foodie spend, etc. The debt wasn't structured right, so they were paying too much interest. Um, but collectively, it was doing, like, nothing was dramatic, but collectively, it was doing a lot of damage. And when we see clients, generally speaking, the inefficiency piece translates to about 15% of net income that kind of slips through the cracks. We redirected it. That 15-year mortgage, we said initially we'd get it down in six. They've been clients since 2020, and they're making their last mortgage repayment this month. So it must have been happening or just about happened. We have a bell in the office that we ring. We send champers because we're very excited. But in between, they bought an investment property in Papamoa in 2021, short-term debt gone, buffer built, property purchased, mortgage nearly done. And I think that is what a clear plan actually looks like. It's not heroic, it's not complicated, it's just the right moves in the right order. And I think a lot of people become interested in property before they're actually ready for it. And I think that's completely normal. It's how most decisions start. You get curious, you start paying attention, you think maybe now is the time. But enthusiasm alone doesn't make you well positioned to invest. And being able to buy, having the deposit, having the income isn't the same thing as being set up to do it well. The question I want us to hold before we look at any specific decision is this: can my household actually carry this comfortably? Not just technically, not just on paper, comfortably, meaning if things got a bit harder or slower or messier than expected, the strategy could still hold. That is a higher bar than just can I get the lending? And it's the right bar. And again, this is what we walk our clients through every day. And when we work through property readiness with clients, we look at three things. Think of them as a three-part test. First, can you buy? This is the equity question, the deposit question, the lending question. Do you have the structural ability to get into the market? For some people, this is clear. For others, there's more to build first. Exactly like the client that I saw in October 2020. They said they'd dearly love to, but they weren't ready yet. They had to put in place a stronger foundation for which to build upon. Second, can you hold? This is the monthly reality question. Can you manage the top ups, the repairs, the vacancies, the rate movements without putting your household under constant pressure? Because property is not passive in the early years, it does ask you something of you. And third, can you hold long enough? Property, it does, it works best with time. A hold horizon of around 10 years is a common filter we use. If your circumstances don't allow that, if retirement is close or life is about to get complicated, the strategy may need to be different. And all three need to line up, not just one, not just two, all three. And which of these three feel like the biggest question mark for you right now? And just sit with that in terms of your readiness. And I think one thing that comes up a lot, I've got equity in my home. That means I can invest, right? And equity is a great starting point. It can open the door, but it doesn't automatically create capacity, and capacity is what you actually need. So instead of just asking how much equity do I have, try asking how much flexibility do I actually have? And flexibility, it's a higher test and it's looking at that fuller picture. Usable equity, what the bank will actually let you access. Serviceability, whether your income supports the additional debt, and inter they're usually heavily linked, but that serviceability piece, stress tested with your numbers, can sometimes be different. We look at your cash flow, what's actually left at the end of the month after everything, not hypothetically, actually. And also, we're looking at that existing debt, how much you're already carrying, and non-negotiable, always need to ensure that you have a really good buffer. I've been at Enable Me for over 11 years, and I think I've seen almost every permutation. And we don't design a plan for a perfect day. We ensure that when the tide goes out, because very likely the tide will go out at some point in time, no one is swimming naked. And that is very important to me. And these things need to work together. Someone might have significant equity, but very little cash flow flexibility. Someone else might have modest equity, but a very strong income position. The combination is what matters. And I want to draw a distinction that I think is really important and one that a lot of people don't make until they're already in the middle of it. Buying ability and holding ability, they're different things. So, buying ability is about whether you can get the deal done. Holding ability is about whether you can sustain the decision over time through the normal, predictable bumps that come with owning a rental property. Those bumps include the top ups when the rent doesn't cover all the cost, vacancies when the property sits empty between tenants, repairs because something always needs fixing, insurance and rates going up and down, the interest rate movements, which can shift your monthly obligations, and just life carrying on. Your own income changes, family changes, unexpected cost. None of these are reasons not to invest, but they need to be planned for. The households that do well are the ones who go in with their eyes open, not the ones who assume it'll all be straightforward. And we all know the phrase, time in the market beats timing the market. It's a truism, but the truism for a reason, because the data backs it up consistently. For property investors, I translate this into a practical question. Does this decision still make sense across my timeline? Because that's the real filter, not whether property prices are going to go up in the next 2 years, not whether interest rates are going to move. These things matter, but they're noise if your timeline is short. If you have a 10-year horizon, short-term fluctuations become largely irrelevant. Property has time to do its work. But if your horizon is shorter, because retirement is approaching, because circumstances are changing, then the strategy may need to be different. Not necessarily no property, but different property decisions. And this is where it gets personal. 10 years means something different for a 45-year-old than it does for a 58-year-old. Your timeline is yours, and your strategy needs to reflect that. And something I find really useful to share with clients is the idea of sequencing. Property investing is really one isolated decision. For most household, it's part of a sequence, and where you are in that sequence matters a lot. And a typical sequence might look something like first, we strengthen that home mortgage position, get that debt working harder. Then make sure the rental, if you have one, can be held without ongoing pressure. We always say we kind of want to stabilize before you grow. And then we're reducing that structural risk where possible. Think about what happens if rate rises or income changes, and then decide, do you buy again, diversify into other assets, start simplifying ahead of retirement. The point is, the next best move almost always depends on where you are in the sequence. And jumping ahead, skipping a step is where a lot of people create unnecessary pressure. And one of the most useful things we do in a coaching session, in my mind, and of course, there's lots of useful things, is just help someone figure out where they actually are in the sequence and what means for what comes next. And property is a powerful wealth tool. I genuinely believe it. I invest in it myself. I think that leverage piece is a really powerful superpower when it comes to property. It builds equity over time. It can eventually support income. It feels real in a way that other investments sometimes don't, but it also has real characteristics that need to be planned around. It's concentrated, often your biggest asset by a distance. It's illiquid. You can't sell a bathroom if you need cash quickly, and it's demanding. It can ask time, attention, and ongoing financial headroom. That's why we also look at property alongside the other elements of your plan. I said to my client yesterday, you never just move one thing. It's about looking across everything you do holistically to make sure that all elements of your plan are serving you. So that is debt, it's cash flow, it's KiwiSaver, it's insurance. And again, that's really protective in terms of when you are investing in property, having the ability to hold in terms of ensuring your income, the asset itself. And again, investing outside of property and retirement planning and timing, that all feeds into that overarching plan. And a great property decision can be undermined by underfunded retirement. An optimized mortgage can be wiped out by underinsurance, and everything is connected. And that's why that holistic view, it is not optional. It's just how good financial planning works. It should be the measure. And again, that takes nothing away from the power of property. You put in your money, the bank puts in their money, and you keep 100% of that gain. Historically, it has outperformed other asset classes when you look at that leveraged asset across time, but you have to be clinical and you have to do it well. And that retirement lens, it is so important. So for anyone in this room who's getting closer to retirement, comes around so quickly, maybe 5, 10, 15 years away, I want to offer a bit of a different lens on property, and property can absolutely support retirement. Many of our clients have built genuinely meaningful retirement income through property, but owning property doesn't automatically solve retirement. And that distinction really matters. And the questions I'm really wanting you to sit with is, how much debt will still exist when I want to retire? Am I carrying this into retirement, or will it be gone? Will this asset create income for me or pressure? Is it cash flow positive, or will I be topping it up? How much flexibility will I need? And does this asset give me that? And could I access money from this asset if I had to, or is it locked up in equity that I can't easily reach? And does this asset still suit the life I want later, or has what I want changed? And there are no room for wrong answers here, but there are answers that change what the right strategy look like, and it's worth asking them now, not in 15 years. And so by the end of this conversation and by the end of a proper coaching session, people usually land in one of four places when it comes to property. They start, the foundations are there, the strategy is clear, and property is worth exploring seriously. They want to leverage, they want to increase the capacity and the pace at which they grow wealth. Or It's a hold. You're already in the market, the strategy still fits, and patience remains your most powerful tool. Or maybe it's a review. You're in the right asset, but the structure around it needs attention. Maybe the lending is inefficient, you're paying too much interest to the bank, the ownership structure or the debt management isn't optimized, or potentially it's a bit of a pivot. Something else may actually suit your goals better right now, and that might be paying down the home mortgage, building KiwiSaver, which again runs through everything when you're employed, or it might be investing differently. And here's something important, a clear not yet, or even a not property right now, can be just as valuable as a confident, yep, yes, and it keeps you from making an expensive move before the foundations are ready. And to us, those foundations are really important in terms of being able to weather the storm and really maximize your position. And the goal isn't to sell you on property, the goal is to help you make the right core for you. And for us at Enable Me, we're agnostic. Some of our clients invest in property, equities, funds, and most do a bit of both. Again, it's just that sequencing and where do they lean and how does that fit into the broader plan in terms of their goals and timeline. And I think everything I've shared today, the kind of readiness test, the sequencing, the retirement lens, all of it's general. And general, it's useful to a point, but your decisions that they need to be specific because what's right depends on your time frame, your goals, your risk appetite, your cash flow, your debt, your access to equity, your lending position, and your wealth goals. And Warren Buffett's line is a good one. Timing the market is far better than timing the market, but even Buffett would agree that the right time to enter any market is when you're well positioned to hold through the inevitable volatility. And the work we do in a coaching session is exactly that, taking those general frameworks and making them very specific, mapping out your numbers, identifying where the gaps are, building a strategy that makes sense for your actual life and ensure you execute on them with accountability. And I think one thing worth flagging, tomorrow it is budget day. Um, we don't know what's in it yet, largely, but we do know that budget regularly touch on housing, KiwiSaver, and tax settings, and any of those could shift the landscape we've been talking about tonight. And that's another reason to get a proper look at your situation sooner rather than later, while we can still plan around what's coming rather than react to it after the fact. And if today has raised some questions for you, which I really hope it has, because good questions are where good decisions start, then I'd love to tell you about our process and our consultation. It's a 60 to 90-minute session with a qualified Enable Me financial advisor and coach, me or one of my team. We're all up and down the country. We do video consults. In that session, we do four things. We look at your full financial picture, assets, income, spending, debt, KiwiSaver, goals. So we're not working with a partial view. We map out your financial default, what happens if nothing changes against what becomes possible with a clear plan. We identify the inefficiencies, maybe that's the mortgage structure, the spending that isn't serving your future self, and we give you a clear sense of your next best move, whether that's property or something else. At the end, you decide what you want to do, and there's no obligation to continue with us. But in my experience, most people leave with far more clarity than they came in with, and that's valuable regardless of what they decide to do next. And I know we've got a lot of amazing clients on the call tonight. So if you're already working with an Enable Me advisor or a coach, fantastic. This is exactly the kind of conversation to continue with them. Just reach out and say you'd like to work through the property question. They know exactly where to take it from there. And for everyone who's new to Enable Me, here's how you can take a next step. You can book a consult at enableme.wealth.backslash move. I think Emma's going to pop it in the chat. And because you've joined us today, you can access it for $100 instead of the usual 400. That price is available if you book tonight. After that, it's 149, which is still strong value for a 90-minute session, but the best rate is right now. And so you've got the QR code on screen, and hopefully Emma's going to pop that link in the chat. Thank you, Emma. Just head there, enter your details, and we'll take it from there. Okay, let's get into your questions. I love this part because the questions are always specific, and I think specific is where the real insight lives. Emma.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise, Katie. I have just chucked the link in the chat, so it should be there in three different ways in case you want to jump on that offer tonight. But we now have time for a Q&A from our audience, and thank you to everybody who sent in a question in advance of the webinar and who have sent them in during the webinar. So the first question I have is, we know we should probably have a rental property, but we're too scared to take the leap. What can we do to reassure ourselves?
Yeah, I think lots of people are feeling that at the moment. So you are not alone. And I think fear at this point is usually a signal that something isn't clear enough yet. And it's that again, it's useful information. And in my experience, the antidote to fear isn't courage. It's honestly, it's a plan. When you know what you're trying to achieve, what the property needs to do, how much you should spend, not the same thing as what the bank will lend you, and what a sustainable cash flow top up looks like for your household, I think the decision feels less like a leap and starts feeling like just a logical next step. And I think you've really got to know your criteria before you look at properties. Again, what's the maximum purchase price that keeps you in a strong holding position? Remember, we talked about that sequencing piece and what net yield do you need? What's the maximum top up you can carry comfortably? Once you have those numbers, I think you're shopping with a filter, not just a feeling. And if you're honestly, if you're not sure of those numbers, that's exactly what a consultation is for. So please do reach out.
Thank you, Katie. And the second question I have here is it better to pay off our own home loan before we purchase a rental property?
Such a good question. It does come up a lot. And again, not individualized financial advice. Um, but for most of my clients, the answer is no. And I think understanding the reasoning behind that is really important. And getting your home mortgage free as fast as possible. It's absolutely a cornerstone of any good plan. It's unproductive debt, it's your biggest cash outflow, and eliminating it de-risks everything. But for most clients, we do it concurrently with building wealth. That's really important. And here's the cost of waiting. I think every year you delay entering the market, you're missing out on capital appreciation on that other asset. And there's a harder issue at play as well, which you've just got to acknowledge. I think the window to access lending, it does not stay open indefinitely. It just doesn't. And as you get closer to retirement, the bank's appetite to lend reduce. It really does. And if you wait until the mortgage is fully paid off, you sometimes find that you've just waited too long and accidentally you end up with a shorter runway to retirement, needing a bigger gain over a less time, which actually puts more risk into your position, not less.
Thank you, Katie. And the third question I have here is, my house is old and currently rented out, so maintenance is costly. Is
Mm,
it worth spending a large amount renovating an older home?
yeah. And I think in my experiences, old, and they're generally your family home, and I'm not sure if this is the case for this person, but often they are. So, they've got their first home and then they go to the bank and they want to upgrade their home and the bank says, well, you can keep this home and then we'll lend you money for the next. And they're like, well, I heard property investing is a good thing. Might as well do that. And we call them accidental rentals, properties that become rentals by circumstance rather than design. And they often aren't the right vehicle for the job they're being asked to do. And I think here's a principle I come back to. I push back really hard on the never sell a property premise. I don't agree with it. The idea that you hold every property forever, regardless of performance, that is not a strategy. I think it's a sentiment. And for most of my clients, the question isn't, do I hold this forever, but rather, is this property still serving me for the next cycle? And at Enable Me, for our clients, we can assess this across gross yield, weekly top up, capital growth outlook, maintenance, and capex, geographic concentration, where is it located compared to other properties that you own, and that banking complexity. And that gives a clinical view rather than an emotional one. And sometimes the honest answer is to sell, free up the capital, and redeploy it somewhere that works harder. And that might be to buy a newer property, it might be to divest into other investment classes like managed funds. Again, comes down to goals, timeline, and your capacity going forward. Such a good question.
Thank you for that answer, Katie. And the next one is, I would like to understand your viewpoint on property as an investment for someone who is 10 years out from retirement, as
Mm,
opposed to being younger and just
yeah.
starting out.
Yeah, yeah, I think we get more and more interested in retirement the closer we get to it. Um, 10 years out, in my mind, you've got about a property cycle ahead of you. And I think it can change the approach for some people, not all, but some. I think it's still very much on the table, but the balance between capital and growth becomes more important than it would be for a 35-year-old. And I want my clients in this position to be targeting a gross yield of at least 4% with a clear strategy to get that property cash flow neutral as quickly as possible. Why is that? Because cash flow neutral means you just have choice, and choice about when to sell, choice about when to retire, choice about what comes next. That is really critical in any financial plan. And I think for someone who is starting out, you can afford to carry a bit more top up in exchange for strong capital growth prospects. But at 10 years out, that margin for error is narrower. So the numbers have to kind of stack up more cleanly from the start. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you, Katie. And the last question I think we have time for just to squeeze in before the end of our
Oh,
45-minute webinar. The last one is I bought an investment property 4 years ago and the value is still lower than what I paid.
mm,
What is your advice? At what age is holding a property not the best option?
yeah. And this is more common right now than people realize. And I'm going to be honest with you, rather than just reassuring. And as property investors, we need to understand that property is cyclical. Investing is cyclical, let's be honest. Values dip, sit flat, and then they move. And 4 years at the wrong point in a cycle, it can feel like super discouraging, but it's not unusual when you look back in time. And obviously, without me knowing your specific situation, I genuinely can't tell you what to do, and I'd be doing you a disservice if I tried. But what I can say is this. If you have the ability to hold the cash flow, the buffers, the lending headroom, most people in this position would hold. Again, time in the market is it's what allows the cycle to do its work. And again, that's really important in terms of what comes next. Make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. That's a great answer. And that is all the questions that we have time for tonight. Sorry that we can't answer absolutely everybody's questions today. And I can also see a few questions about our coaching programs in the chat. So we do encourage that if you have any questions about our financial consultations or programs, to email us via info@enable.me or call us at the number on our website. And I'll hand back over to you, Katie, to finish us off tonight.
Oh, thank you so much. And I think this has just genuinely been a great group. I've been looking at the chat and the questions are so good. I tried to cover off as much as I can in the bulk of the webinar and love how engaged you were. And I really do hope you're leaving with a clearer sense of what the next question needs to be for you. And if you want to go deeper, book that consult, use the QR code or link in the chat and in the follow-up email tomorrow. I'd love to sit down. Well, we would love to sit down with you and work through those specifics. So have a great rest of the evening and good luck with those property decisions. Make them intentional.